about boundaries. And I think as we're rising out of trauma, we're often trying to figure out where the lines are because we've never had that. There were people crossing lines with us in our personal space, in our psyche from the get-go. That's how I viewed it, right? And I bump up against that a lot with my clients. And a shift in thought, I think that's important, is us like shifting away from the idea of having to create boundaries and move into a place of choice around what's acceptable to us, like what we want, what we need in our lives, what brings us joy, what brings us happiness, right? Which is a forward motion rather than having to draw a line in the sand, right? Or build a fence. I find that anytime we build a fence, we're like having to defend it, right? I mean, think about just on the big level, like just state lines, country lines, farm tracks, farm lines. Like we're always having to keep somebody on the outside, right? And in every form of manifestation, the more clear we are around what we want or don't want,
yeah,
is where we manifest, right? And for us, as we're rising up, we have a whole lot of words in the don't column, right? We have a whole lot of words over there. We can tell those stories over and over again, and they become our truth. They become where we live. One of the spiritual teachers writes that be careful building rules because then you have to live inside of them, right? And when we're inside of them, we get that feeling of trapped. And often it's our own trap, right? It's our own trap. Because in our clarity, there's always a way out. Now, there wasn't for us when we were children. I mean, we were definitely living like we were in a concentration camp, right? And, we're in a place and time of cruciality in our world where we, for our world to change, we're going to have to change inside. We're going to have to spend that energy on growing up our inner child and teaching them right-minded thoughts to move out of fear. Like that is the only way our world is going to change, is if we change. Like, in the collective of all that's here, we're like a cell in that collective body of humanity. What happens when cells get off balance? Right? What happens when a cell starts walling itself off from the rest of the body? Right? That's when we get cancer. That's when we get tumors. That's when we get cysts, right? When we're like walling ourselves off. So what shifts that is that cell coming back into wholeness. That cell deciding it's going to do its job again and be a part of the body, right? Or we have to cut it out, right? So I think that when we can step back, yeah, I find it interesting because every spiritual tradition teaches us to step back from the emotion. It teaches that the emotion is illusion and not true, right? And in the West, we have been taught to live there. People get angry when you try to separate them from their emotion, right? And in that emotion is decay, right? Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome.
Thanks.
Um, Today I was talking about the idea of boundary and our responsibility as cells in this collective body to step out of emotion and into action, right? Because our world is in decay right now. Now it's interesting because I sit across from people suffering every day, and I love I I can't even express how much I love, these people because they are the most powerful, amazing people there is, right? They have survived a war that nobody on the planet recognizes, right? And they did that, right? Because a child living in an abusive home is a step below being in a concentration camp.
Oh,
Because when we're in a concentration camp, we have no expectation of love. We have no expectation of support. We have no expectation of anything, right? So we're in the moment dealing with what's in front of us in a out of emotion and in action, right? That child in a concentration camp is not in an emotional state. They're in a state of action, right? Where we take people like you and me, 1 in 3 people on this planet, and they're living the silent war that their families are denying, that the world collectively is denying, and they're suffering, right? And I've got people reaching out to me on Facebook, like, I don't know why I'm living, like, I just want to die. And it's like, you know, we have got to change that, right? Because in our silence, we're perpetuating that, right? Because, we are giving the abusers permission to move on to the next person. We're giving our abusers permission to misbehave, right? And when we look at, I love that it's 11:11 here right now,
yeah.
and we're moving into the Lionsgate, right? Like we are. And that Lionsgate is an opening for change. Like our world wants us to change. Our creator, the energies on this planet are in a state of rise. But we have to understand if these energies are rising, so are these. Right? So we have, because they're in defense mode, right? So when we can just look inward and go, all right, like I am going to detach from this emotion. It's not important anymore. What's important is that I gather up all these fragments of self, pull them in so that I am a whole vessel and I can do what I came here for, right? We are amazing, amazing creatures. And in our idea that our situation is unique, we get trapped there. Like, I don't know how many conversations I have with people that are like, yeah, but my, yeah, but my. And it's like, the stories I hear sitting here, like, would blow your ears off, right? So, we're not unique. We're 1 in 3 people. We're a third of the planet, right? So, when we can step out of that and go, all right, man, like, this is, I had a young woman get furious with me this morning when I said, we're playing this game of choice. And we are. We're playing a game of choice. Games are not emotional, right? We're making choices to get from here to there, right? And what we encounter on the way, if we are in a state of right mindedness, we're dealing with, not that we're not having fun and things aren't happening, but they're in the moment. They're not a collective of all that time, right? And as grown-ups, if we can say, all right, right, we are the elders on this planet. We're the grown-ups, and we're in our fragmentation operating from this childlike space. We have to bring them in and grow them up. Teach them how to be in this world so that we can teach our children and their children, right? Because we've been given this idea that, you know, and believe me, like, love is what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
But love is different than codependence. And we've been taught that that's what's real. In a state of love, everybody is personally responsible for themselves and their actions. Right? So love doesn't hurt people. Love doesn't trap people. Love doesn't take control over another. Right? Love is that beautiful space of motherhood where we're giving our children what they need over what they might necessarily want. Right? And that's what we have to give ourselves. Right? We have to look inward and go, all right, I'm going to stop creating walls to keep people out, and I'm going to start shoring up myself. I'm going to look inside. I'm going to put the emotion over here, and I'm going to go, all right, let's see what needs to change in me, in the way I'm living, the way I'm showing up in the world, right? Am I showing up in the world in the way that I know that I was intended? Or am I showing up less than? Right? When you just dissect the word, boundaries are bound are we. Bound are we. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can look around our communities. We've got these privacy fences up everywhere, and you're sitting inside by yourself while you're keeping everybody out. Right? We have to think about that. Right? I think as humans, we tend to make things so incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
But spirit is simple and spirit is childlike. Right? Spirit is simple and spirit is childlike. So when we can get into that state of clarity, our thoughts become very clear and very simple. Right? When they become all convoluted, we know that our ego is involved in all that.
Ego.
That was driven home to me so clearly when I was studying with Deepak Chopra. I would sit there, and I grew up in as a Christian, not that I claim that now, but I do believe that human being that led that initial surge was a powerful being. And I said the human being that led that surge of new thought was a very powerful being. And his one-liners that are so incredibly simple, I would sit and listen to physicists and quantum physicists talk for hours. And I'm like, really? Like, one line. That's the clarity of manifestation, you guys.
Are we talking about Jesus of Nazareth?
Yes.
Okay.
I always hesitate to say his name because he has such a tangled, massive, like, collective energy.
I always Say Jesus of Nazareth because then you know, I know who it is.
I usually call him the Great White Wizard,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Because he was one of the few that could truly manipulate matter.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, and like I said, like, you know, sitting there and taking away the hoodoo that was wrapped around him, you know, he was an amazing physicist and quantum physicist. Like his actions were quantum actions, right?
He was the truth.
Just truth.
Truth.
Truth doesn't need a lot of words.
No.
And that's what we need to understand. So when we're coming into that wholeness of being a vital cell in the collective, right? And we have to really remember that each cell in our body has a job that it's choosing to do. Because you could take that same cell and go put it in a petri dish and grow it into whatever they would want. That cell is choosing to do its job in your body, right? And in this collective body, we have to understand our families are organs and we're cells. Our organs are decaying, right? We are responsible for rising that. That's why we're here, right? Our world can't be healthy. We're not going to be breeding the quote presidents we want to see if we're rotting from the inside out, right? And PTSD is contagious. It travels through lineage after generation after generation. It's contagious. But what I want to say, and I want everyone to drink in, is that so is wholeness.
Yep.
It just doesn't have all the emotion around it, so it's harder to want to move into it because that emotion is sticky, like gum, like honey, right? And we've been taught to live there on purpose, on purpose. We have been taught to live there because that keeps us wallowing backwards rather than moving forward. Anytime we're entrenched in emotion, right, we're circling back and connecting our today to something we already know that was a horrible experience, right? We're circling back, right? When we're clear, the emotion is very clear and very directed to what is current and real, almost like a motion detector, right? Think of children. You come and you take a toy away from them, they're going to throw a fit, and then they're going to get up and they're either going to go get that toy back or they're going to go find a new one. And they're going to weigh which one's going to require more energy, right? They're not going to sit there for days on end and circling around in the fact that somebody took their toy away. Back to that wonderment of childhood, right?
Very interesting that you, I'm not laughing because it's funny, but that you put us under concentration camp.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Already into wholeness, but okay. But that's a very true statement, and it's a very sad statement.
Sad.
Well, I hope that we can move from it being sad and into action, right? Because like that is a war that we'll go and send troops over and fight other people's wars, but we've got this raging in our homes. 1 in 3 people And we're expecting them to grow up and be substantial members of society. That doesn't even make sense.
Not at all.
You know, my daughter just rescued a dog.
Hmm.
When I first met this dog, I was like, this dog has been abused. She
Oh.
has had head trauma. And, you know, she is, instant hit, right?
Aw.
You know, the expectation that this dog would come into their home and immediately be a part of their family when it's afraid of people is not a real reality. And we accept that about about dogs. And we expect our children to just wipe it clean. You're a grown up now. Get over it.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times that was said to me. Can't you just get over it? Right? And no, it's a rehabilitation. Just like we would take that dog and rehabilitate it,
Uh-huh.
create new behaviors, new responses to behaviors, right? We would try to remedy that moment when it went sideways and its choices were no longer serving. Because when we're going sideways, we're operating out of fear. And we're going, so back to the boundaries. If we're operating out of fear and we're creating these boundaries, then we're fighting at it to defend it. We're always having to defend. Right? When you're in a place of wholeness and integrity, it kind of really doesn't matter what everybody thinks.
That's true.
It just doesn't matter because you know that you're operating from the highest of everyone, right? If you're in integrity, you're like making choices, and how people respond to them is their responsibility. The way this game has been laid out for us is that, you know, us speaking out and calling an abuser into question is a sin, is a violation on some level, right? The victim is silenced and told to go home and get over it and forgive this person, right? So forgiveness is our freedom from emotion. You looking at him and saying, okay, I forgive you. What did that change? If inside you're still being triggered and the emotion is still bubbling, right? It doesn't mean anything, right? And I'm sorry doesn't mean anything if tomorrow it's going to happen again. So what is the purpose of that game other than to keep us trapped
Silent.
in silence and swimming in a circle, right? And I'm not speaking of vengeance,
No.
right? I'm speaking of you, right? Choosing. Say, you know, your perpetrator is going to be at an event. You choose whether you want to go or not. You get to choose whether you want to be in the room with them or not. And you get to declare that. I'm not coming if I'm going to be sitting in a room with a pedophile. I don't think so. And then everybody else gets to choose what they want to do. Either they invite him in and they enjoy that, or they invite you in and tell him he can't come. Right? But when we step into being able to make these choices, if we're in an emotional state, like whatever they choose is going to kill us unless it's us. Right? And the definition of insanity is expecting them to make a different choice. Right? Because if we are declaring, I mean, it's just mind-blowing family denial to me, right? It is just mind-blowing. Like, it's so sideways. Well, but, you know, if you're going to choose to stand behind a pedophile, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Does that mean you haven't forgiven the pedophile? Or does that mean they're in a state of sideways thought? An upside down support, I guess is the word I want to say. Right?
Yeah. And support. Writing all these little great phrases. Upside down support. That
You know,
makes a lot of sense to me.
it's completely upside down.
Yeah.
Right? There was a situation in the last year or so in a town close to me where a young woman had come forward that she was probably about 14 or 15 before she was able to vocalize it, that the mayor of the city had been molesting her, coming to her house day in and day out. And the whole city turned against her. He was a deacon in the church. He was the mayor. Like, he was all these amazing things to everyone. Right? And they were, turn to her and say, how dare you ruin this good man's name? Upside freaking down. Upside down. Well, he ended up like, but she had to leave town because the whole town was in such an uproar over her that he went to jail. So the whole town pushed her out.
But he went to jail.
He did go to jail because he finally admitted it. He said he had slept with her 700 and some odd times.
Well, then, okay. You know what I mean? If he's not going to do it again to somebody else. And
but the persecution for her.
Exactly.
Right? And
where was her, just not judging, where was the mama and the daddy in all of this? How can a mayor come into your house and sleep with your child?
I often ask those questions over and over again. Where was your mother?
Where was your mama?
You're right.
Where was your mother?
Wow.
Right? We have to know and understand that when we bear a child, they're ours, period. Like, they're ours. And
I like to say our kids that we have, just hit 60 or 59 in 14 months. My kid is telling her kid all about this and teaching her all about the body parts.
Yeah,
true. No one can touch, you know what I mean? It's an education that I never had. That
And I know exactly. Like, my 3-year-old granddaughter will say, "Don't touch my body. Only I get to touch my body."
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like,
that's right.
Yay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. And we don't teach our children, or I think it's crucial that we start, right? We've been teaching this idea that, again, falling in with this forgiveness and love and boundaries, that our children are safe with grown-ups. 1 in 3 people, like human beings, like, we have to teach that not everybody is safe. And that doesn't have to be scary, right? We teach our children to drive a car 70 miles an hour. And we teach them that not everybody on that road is responsible, and they have to be aware and alert, aware of their personal space. They have to have words to describe what's going on around them, right? If they were going to go out into the jungle, we would teach them that these majestic, beautiful creatures, right, are liable to hurt you, right? But we send them out onto the streets, into life, thinking everyone will love them. Rather than teaching them to, I don't like the word protect at all, because that's a fearful word. But the idea that you get to choose. Use your voice. Right? If somebody is crossing boundaries or crossing lines or invading your personal space, right? They have to know where they can go, that that's going to be heard. I know for myself, I was asked over and over again, but there was no telling me what was going to happen if I spoke, right? And in my knowingness, I was like, well, if I speak and they send me home, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good at all.
Right.
Right? Or if I speak and I get sent off to a stranger's house, at least at home, I knew my demons. Right? Because I was very clear as well that, my grandmother was a foster parent. I knew what these kids live like in other foster homes. Right? There's a lot of abuse that happens there.
Shame.
Right? So for us to take on this journey ourselves and decide, okay, like, this isn't about the story. This isn't about the emotion. This is about putting myself back together. It's interesting, in a class I was in, we were doing deep medical intuitive stuff, and she was kind of testing us, and she's like, how many of you can see the grid? And I was like, I can see the grid. And like on a computer screen, when you see a human being being created and it makes that grid first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Think so.
You're not talking about the grid, but the human being first. I don't understand that.
Well, I'm talking about the grid that makes you. There's a grid, that an energetic grid, that makes you, right? And that grid is broken, right? And when we can go and find all the pieces and put it back together, that's when we're not leaking energy. That's when we're able to just be true to who we are, right? Is when we get that grid put back together. And that's not emotional. That's saying, I'm going to go find the pieces so that I can put that back together, right? Because that is your vessel.
That's like action.
That's action, right? We don't change without action. We don't change just sitting thinking about it. I would love to think that was true. I've meditated all around the world with some of the most amazing people. And what changes that occurred were created in action.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than retreat. We spend a lot of time in retreat.
Mm-hmm.
We get up to close to something and we retreat. Get up
Mm-hmm.
close to something and we retreat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How does that feel?
It's real and it feels true.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
True.
a new way to look at it, right? It's like all this like murk, and it's like, come on, like,
Yeah.
it's simple. Yeah, it's just very simple.